Testimony before Congress was damning. Not only was the pullout of Afghanistan a fiasco, but the campaign failed to achieve its primary aim.
It was an extraordinary disaster. It will go down in history as one of the greatest failures of American leadership. We have zero presence in Afghanistan. It could be as little as 12 months before al-Qaeda will use Afghanistan as a base to conduct airstrikes or strikes against the United States. Frankly, after this debacle of a withdrawal, I don't think anyone can trust anything this president says about Afghanistan.
We need to consider some uncomfortable truths, that we did not fully comprehend the depth of corruption and poor leadership in their senior ranks, that we did not grasp the damaging effect of frequent and unexplained rotations by President Ghani of his commanders, and that we failed to fully grasp that there was only so much for which and for whom many of the Afghan forces would fight.
So after an entire war aimed to eliminate a terrorist threat to America, that threat could now be worse.
It's a real possibility in a not too distant future, 6, 12, 18, 24, 36 months, that kind of time frame, for reconstitution of al-Qaeda or ISIS.
Terrorist organizations seek ungoverned spaces so that they can train and equip and thrive, and there is clearly a possibility that that can happen here going forward.
Afghanistan, in effect, now has become an entire terrorist state. Taliban, even though they may think that they're trying to govern that place, itself is split. And you have internal factions which are linked to al-Qaeda and ISIS-K or Khorasan. And already we're seeing ISIS attacking Taliban. And there's also the possibility that al-Qaeda could join up with ISIS as more of its fighters come into the country. And there's no guarantee then that Taliban can ensure that attacks will not be planned and launched from from Afghanistan.
But there were more revelations in the testimony. Apparently, behind closed doors, the Biden administration was more divided on Afghanistan.
I think while it's conceivable that you could stay there, my view is that you would have had to deploy more forces in order to protect ourselves and accomplish any missions that we would have been assigned.
It appears that the Department of Defense was not fully on board with pulling out of Afghanistan, and they are arguing for maintaining some presence in the country.
My view was that we needed to maintain about 2,500, and that we also needed to work with our coalition partners who had about 6,000 troops in there, NATO and other core countries that would remain there.
This flies in the face of the Biden administration's claim that pulling out was a unanimous decision. It's unclear what would really change if the United States stayed in the country. It has been 20 years after all, and the security situation in Afghanistan has not improved. So maybe the mistake wasn't pulling out in 2021, but rather going in 2001. Now, that's a discussion you won't hear on Capitol Hill, but it's probably taking place in many American minds.
For officials on Capitol Hill to attribute that solely to the somewhat chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan is completely absurd. If US officials had dealt with these crimes of September the 11th as what they were and found out who was responsible and brought them to justice, this would have been, at this point, something that happened 20 years ago that was dealt with. Instead, they used September the 11th as a pretext for 20 years of war. What the so-called war on terror was doing was fueling terrorism and legitimate armed resistance in country after country. The United States has actually increased the risk of terrorism.